with the first pick in the 2023 NFL Draft.
Welcome back to the Blitz and Kick podcast, the podcast where we bring you all things football all the time. I am your host, Brad.
No, I'm Kyle.
Tonight, we will read a few excerpts from our book, The Rise and Fall of NFL Teams Through the 2025 Offseason. Now, Professor Kyle and I worked very difficult hours on this book. Professor Kyle, let's just dive right in. Let me get to chapter 1 of our book. I'm sure you remember writing this. Chapter 1 of the book on the Chicago Bears, the Barian dynasty under leadership of his great lordship, Benjamin T. Johnson III. Professor Kyle, how do you feel about this dynasty? Are they in great peril, or are they rising towards the elusive Lombardi Trophy?
Well, I would just like to preface this by saying that not all of the world's problems are solved by throwing money at it. So in this exercise, in this book, in this chapter, you're going to see that, yes, while lots of money is being spent, lots of money is being accrued and given to different players, it does not mean that their dynasty will succeed. However, with the Bears, they threw about $170 million towards these few players. Drew Dahlman, the center from the Falcons, Joe Thuney, the guard from the Chiefs, Jonah Jackson from the Lions, Deo Odeyingbo from the Colts, and then Grady Jarrett from the Falcons again. So, on paper, looks a lot better. Listen, this book would have been incredibly short. This chapter would have been incredibly short if Caleb Williams had no protection whatsoever. It would have started with Caleb Williams goes back to pass. Oh, Caleb Williams breaks his leg and his career is over. Luckily, Ben Johnson said, you know what? My focus is getting the offensive line and the defensive line right. And did they? I think that they did a pretty good start. I mean, Drew Dahlman's a good center. Joe Thuney, yes, he's a little bit older. But still played very well when he was at guard last year, not at tackle. We saw how that worked out. Jonah Jackson didn't get much playing time with the Lions, but again, Ben Johnson's familiar with him. And then Deo Odeyingbo, Grady Jarrett, just adding to the depth of the Bears' defensive line. And their defense was pretty good last year. Chicago Bears, this chapter could very well be a good one. The good outcome for the Bears is they're throwing money at the Hogs up front. You and I have both talked about ad nauseum that you need a good offensive line, defensive line combo. That's where the game is won, at the line of scrimmage. So Ben Johnson, first time he gets in there, he's like, I'm going to correct it. I'm going to make it right. And he does. So $170 million for all those guys, that's a lot of money. However, if they get the offensive and defensive line right, I think they're going to take a step forward this year. The bad outcome, I would say, is that none of those guys are long-term answers at offensive line. So maybe it might not work if they're a little older, if they're a little injured, a little banged up. They could be back to square one next year. So that's all I got.
Do you think then that this will actually fulfill Caleb Williams' promise to his fellow rookie punter, where he said he would not have to punt ever again? Do you think this O-line will change that part of the chapter? Will their story change because of this?
This offensive line will have to play more because they're going to have to punt more. These poor old guys. No, I mean, I think natural progression is one thing. Caleb Williams, all these young quarterbacks that I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more of. Progression is going to take place, but we saw how good Ben Johnson is at creating, designing plays. But you need to do some of that. In order to do some of that, you need an offensive line to protect. And if you do not get the ball out quick, a la Russell Wilson, Jalen Hurts at times, Caleb Williams, Jameis Winston, other guys we could talk about. You need an offensive line that can hold up so these guys can make plays, these playmakers, right? So Ben Johnson, he was like, listen, Caleb Williams, he's never on target, right? Like he's never in the design of the play. I don't know if I can change him as a QB. I don't know if he's going to be a drop back passer. So what I'm going to do is supplement that with offensive linemen. And then maybe during the NFL draft, you get all your holes fixed up. You could draft running back. You could draft offensive line again, or you could draft defensive line and just set the story straight. Chapter 1, or you could call it Chapter 0 last year, was horrible. But I think this is a step in the right direction.
Sure. Let's move on to Chapter 2 of our book, which I think is very fitting to talk about the San Francisco 49ers. Kyle, Sir Christian McCaffrey has had a history of injuries. He has been chasing that Lombardi Trophy. He went to a better team. They've utilized him in better ways, and yet they still fall short. Do you think in this chapter that we wrote many years ago that the San Francisco 49ers, did they move themselves in a position where they will be getting closer to the Lombardi Trophy?
No, this chapter is going to take a dark turn, in my opinion. Sir Debo, Jordan Mason, Javon Hargrave, Leonard Floyd, Talanoa Hafanga, Aaron Banks, Dre Greenlaw, Travarius Ward, Elijah Mitchell, Jalen Moore, Isaac Yiadom, all gone. People talk about the Eagles offseason, how they lost Josh Sweat and Milton Williams, and I get it. Those are big players. No one's talking about how many guys the 49ers lost. All they're talking about is how much money is Brock Purdy gonna get. Let me just tell you this one thing. It won't matter how much he gets, okay? The good outcome for the 49ers is like all these losses won't matter because maybe Shanahan and Brock Purdy will be the next Sean Payton and Drew Brees, okay? That is a thought that's out there. I don't really believe it. It's in the book. I don't really believe it.
I ripped those pages out of that chapter. Good. I apologize.
You got to write it all, right? You got to give all the hypotheticals to all the listeners, to all the readers, just to lay it out bare, right? But here's the thing: you lose all these players, and look at the best players they have now on their team. Let's just think about it off the top of our head. We have Christian McCaffrey, Trent Williams, and Fred Warner. Okay, and Nick Bosa too. Nick Bosa, he still's got some game left in him, obviously. But I would argue Fred Warner, McCaffrey, and Trent Williams are all getting up there. Definitely Christian McCaffrey and Trent Williams' careers are done soon. Those are two of your best players. Fred Warner's not getting any younger. Same with Bosa. So you lose all these players. You're going to pay Brock Purdy an insane amount, which I think he's good, but he's not top 5 money quarterback good. You're just hamstringing yourself to a bad beat. I think this next 49ers chapter is not going to be good. I've seen the deficiencies along their offensive line, and when Shanahan cannot call the plays that he wants to call due to injuries, due to not having the right guys, eventually you just have to rely on the Jimmies and Joes. And right now on their offensive line, especially with Aaron Banks gone, Trent Williams being an old fart, the Jimmies and Joes up front aren't good. Defensive line, same thing. Other than Nick Bosa, yikes. It's pretty bad right now.
Sure.
And they lost a lot of secondary pieces. So, they definitely could be good next year. Shanahan's a good play caller. The system's still good. Salah's back. Robert Salah's back. He's a good defensive coordinator, but I am getting to the point where I'm believing that this chapter is going to be a bad one.
Let me read an excerpt from this chapter from famed historian Kyle Stradamus. Let me read it here. When thou payest game managers, suffereth will be thy team. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. And I think that's kind of where the 49ers are now. Kyle Stradamus, if you don't know him, look him up. Really brilliant guy, calls a lot of stuff that happens in the NFL. I'll probably put together a compilation of Kyle Stradamus later.
And George Kittle is getting up there too.
Yeah, well, getting up there and not producing as well anymore. So there's
obviously he's a great guy, great player. Love to have him on your team, but he's not getting any younger either. So
let's go on to chapter 3. Chapter 3 is interesting because we start getting into the Yankee country Patriots. Now look, I think you and I normally would say this chapter continues that dark trend, but I believe there is a light at the end of the chapter. What are some of the things that the Yankees up north are doing to maybe push themselves closer to not quite a Lombardi, but a early playoff exit?
Well, they're definitely pushing themselves somewhere, and that is out of money. They have paid about over $350 million this offseason.
350 American dollars?
Yes, unfortunately.
A million? Sorry.
Obviously, they're not paying all of that this year, but the contracts for these players that I'm going to talk about have accrued, or in their lifetime, or their contract lifetime, it's going to accrue over $350 million, assuming they all stay for their duration of the contract. Stephon Diggs, Milton Williams, Harold Landry, Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis, Garrett Bradbury, Marcus Epps, and Morgan Moses. Okay. Some of these guys I like. Some of these guys I used to like, and then they got old. I think the good outcome for the Patriots is, oh my gosh, finally, we have some good players. You're going to see not just a mishmash of crappy people on your TV screen or in your chapter. You're going to see a bunch of normal, average to good players that finally produce, and it won't be hard to watch. Okay. Stephon Diggs, if he gets healthy, he can still produce. Harold Landry, back with Vrabel, he can still produce. Robert Spillane, Carlton Davis, Marcus Epps was almost a Super Bowl winning safety with the Eagles a couple years ago. Morgan Moses is a good depth tackle for a team that has none.
Nothing. Yeah.
Has nothing. Garrett Bradbury, the same, has not lived up to his draft billing, but cannot be any worse than the linemen they have. Yeah. They don't have any. Patriots, I like where we're going. I do. Yeah. I like Vrabel. I like some of these pickups. I like getting better and better and better. They have a relatively young team. Obviously, when you have Drake May, if we were writing a book about Drake May, I think it would be a long one and a good one. That's how much I believe in Drake May. I think he can be a very good quarterback with a very long career and a lot of things, good things written about him. The bad outcome for this team is it enough juice? Is it enough for Drake May? And are the best days of some of these guys behind them? The worry is that Stephon Diggs could blow up. Morgan Moses could get hurt. Garrett Bradbury, Marcus Epps, Carlton Davis, Harold Landry. The only one in there that's like kind of new and exciting is Milton Williams. But you could also argue his best days could be behind him because the Patriots don't have a Jalen Carter like he had on the Eagles.
How dare you talk about Christian Barmore in that way?
I love Christian Barmore. Don't get me wrong. No, it's good, but he's had some major health issues. I don't know where he's going to be at. You know, that's concerning for them. Jalen Carter takes up two people. That leaves Mr. Milton one-on-one, and that's a fun story to write about. He tears up one-on-ones. Is he going to get that with the Patriots? So the bad outcome is you could argue the best days of a lot of these guys are behind them, and it's not enough for juice for Drake May to continue to develop. And that was what concerns me. It's because right now at this moment, they still don't have an offense around him that's like I feel good about. It's Ramondre Stevenson at running back, old Hunter Henry, Stephon Diggs coming off an ACL, and a mishmash offensive line. Bears took that step, right? Yeah. In that chapter, they got the offensive lineman. They already had DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, Cole Kmet. Patriots don't have that yet, and they're not going to fill that out in one draft.
No.
So
it reeks of desperation to me. If you want my honest opinion, when you read those out, I'm like, sure, I guess. Like,
I think if these guys are healthy, they can definitely take a step forward.
Now, if they take like Abdul Carter or Travis Carter in the draft, suddenly this looks a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, I think getting Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter automatically makes your team better on both sides of the field, and more exciting too. Like that's just a fun toy to play with. But yeah, in this chapter, I think they took a step forward, but it's not a massive one.
No, it's not enough. Let's go to chapter 4, the Kansas City Natives. The Natives have been there again and again, and they do super well. However, I'm worried about the potential trajectory they are now taking. Professor Kyle, what were your thoughts when you were writing this chapter?
Well, it was a sad ending, this last chapter. I mean, not for me, obviously, I loved it, but for a lot of people, it was sad. It was just an obliteration. It was like reading a wartime book. It was just a massacre, whatever massacre you want to talk about. This is the next one. And it was the Eagles versus the Chiefs. And in that aftermath, they lost Joe Thuney, their D tackle Wharton, and Derek Nottie, who are both very good against the run. And Wharton had a breakout year. Justin Reed, their leader of a safety, DeAndre Hopkins. Listen, I know he's not what he once was, but like he was still more than what they had.
Yeah.
And then they brought back Hollywood Brown, Kareem Hunt, Travis Kelce, and McCole Hardman. Am I supposed to get excited about that? Does that excite the readers to bring those 4 guys back? I get some of them have had some nice moments with the Chiefs. Sure. You're going to see them in the picture books. You're going to see them online holding up a trophy. But as it currently states now, those guys aren't very good. And you're bringing those guys back. That's concerning. The good outcome for the Chiefs is Kelce plays like he's in his prime again. The addition of Jalen Moore, overpaid Jalen Moore, Kingsley Suamataia, are turnstiles and are legitimate players. And the receivers automatically become better and don't get in trouble. That's a good outcome.
It's asking a lot.
Yeah, it is. And the bad outcome is Mahomes is scared for his life because the offensive line is not fixed. His middle of the field target is old, should have retired. And then Chris Jones does not have any help next to him. So therefore, he's kind of negated. This is what happens during these sorts of stories. Okay. We have the massive team. They rise big. They win a lot. And sometimes you want to see them fail. Eventually they do. It's hard for some of these teams to get back to relevancy. It's hard for some of these teams to get back to where they once were as a dynasty. Yep. And I think the Chiefs have definitely taken a step back. Because if you look at it, I wouldn't say they're necessarily tremendous at drafting either. Like if you look at it, it's not insane. Mahomes has made up for a lot of their drafting deficiencies, as has Spagnuolo. Like Joe Thuney, who's their best. Yeah, he was a trade. I get it. Trey Smith and Creed Humphrey, you got me there. But recent bias, like Sky Moore was awful. Jury's out on Rashee Rice. Like they put a lot of stock in Isaiah Pacheco, but I think they want to move on from him right now. They haven't found a suitable backup for Travis Kelce long term. I think at times their drafting is subpar. So I don't like their additions in free agency. I think they lost a lot. So this chapter, I don't think is going to end all that well.
Sure. And it goes back to what you wrote on chapter 147, that dynasties, your principle of the rainbow effect, that a dynasty starts kind of in this way, kind of a pattern. And I think the Natives are starting to get to the point where we're probably about here on the back end of that dynasty. We are in that crucial moment where they either get bold enough to supplant Mahomes or not supplant, but support Mahomes, or they back off and the decline starts. He eventually asks for a trade in a couple of years. We're starting to hit. It may not be this offseason. It might be next offseason, but we're starting to hit where the wheels are going to start to fall off. Will they win? Sure. But I think they got so accustomed to being back to the Lombardi Trophy that suffering without it and getting hurt that bad in the Super Bowl it's going to start to unravel. So let's go over here to chapter 5. Chapter 5, of course, being the Minnesota Vikings. There's a lot of opinions on this online. What's our version of this?
So in this chapter, the Vikings have also spent a lot of money. These next players that I'm talking about, they've spent over $303 million. Money. Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Will Fries, Byron Murphy Jr., Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, Ryan Kelly, and Isaiah Rodgers. Now, they did a lot of this because they don't have a lot of draft picks. If you remember last year in the book that we wrote, maybe, they traded up for both J.J. McCarthy and Dallas Turner. Both guys who did not do anything really this year. That's concerning. Number 2 is they had Sam Darnold. He played really well. But then just like Case Keenum or the myriad of other quarterbacks they've had in their dynasty, once they get to the playoffs, they kind of crap the bed. So what did they do? The good outcome is they are going to become the purple people eaters. Their offensive line with the additions of Will Fries, Ryan Kelly, and their defensive line with their additions of Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Brian Flores will get that defense. He'll get them nasty. He'll get them scary. He'll get them dominant. And then with the additions along the offensive line, as with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, Aaron Jones, is that they're going to become a very, very scary team to deal with. The bad outcome is they're assuming that all of these things are going to work because they have their quarterback. Do we know that for sure? We do not. The story is not yet written on J.J. McCarthy. He looked decent in the preseason last year. But guess what? That was last year, and that was preseason, and that was pre-injury. He has not proven – okay, one of our supporters said, watch what you say, Matt will get mad. Listen,
good point, Jerry.
I also have a friend who's a Vikings fan at work, and I think they are a pretty well-run franchise. I do. So I'm not talking smack to the Vikings. I'm just saying don't put all your eggs in the J.J. McCarthy basket. We don't know yet. Like, they are acting right now as if they're assuming that they are a Super Bowl contending team. I don't know that yet. Why? Because they have never shown that. In the Vikings' history, like, they haven't shown that. And in recent history, their quarterbacks have not shown that. So if you're expecting J.J. McCarthy to shoulder a lot of this, yes, you could say, well, he has Jefferson and Jordan Addison and Aaron Jones. He does. But you still have to throw the ball and make good decisions. So bad outcome is they wish Aaron Rodgers would have been their quarterback. They could be wondering that at the end of the year. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, that is valid. Let's go on to chapter 6, the Seattle Seahawks. This one will be interesting because this one also has sparked a lot of debate online. There's been a lot of differing opinions on this. However, based on what we wrote in our book, which Professor Kyle will explain more eloquently than I, where did we feel the direction of this franchise is?
It's going down, and I'm a little confused because Mr. John Schneider, the GM, I thought was pretty good as a GM for a while. Now I'm questioning his abilities. I liked Geno Smith, and would you have to upgrade him at some point? Obviously. The Raiders might select a quarterback in this draft because they know he's not going to be around for a while, okay? So I get that part of it. However, then you go out and give a massive contract to I see Ghost Sam Darnold, the same Sam Darnold who's had only like one good year his entire career, and that was with one of the best offenses in football, one of the best receivers we've ever seen. Concerning. And then not only do you go out and sign Sam Darnold, you get rid of one of your best receivers in franchise history. You cut your other one. And then, okay, to replace that, yes, you get Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Cooper Kupp. Way to go. Those are not adequate replacements. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is known for his deep speed and ability to catch the ball when he's running by people. Well, guess what? He can't even catch the ball. Therefore, his speed is useless. Cooper Kupp, who I loved as a player, obviously has taken many steps back and who's more of a slot guy. Guess who's also a slot guy? Jackson Smith and
and
Jigba.
Jigba. Yeah.
Concerning. Not only did they sign those overpriced older players, they went out and signed DeMarcus Lawrence to a massive 3-year contract as well, who again, I like and can be a pain if you're playing the Cowboys. However, the last 4 years, I would say he's played with Micah Parsons and many other pretty adequate pass rushers.
Yeah.
If they're expecting him to do this all by himself,
Ain't gonna happen.
and they released a plethora of D linemen before free agency even started. So you traded Geno and DK. Your offensive line, you've done nothing to help out with. Nothing. I mean, that's the big thing. Every time we mock the Seahawks, we go to probably Josh Simmons, or another tackle. That's usually what it is, because they're so desperate for offensive linemen. The good outcome for your Seahawks is Darnold doesn't see ghosts. JSN becomes a god, and the NFC West is the worst division in football, so the Seahawks have a good chance to win it. The bad outcome is Darnold pisses his pants like he did with the Jets from the turnstiles they have at offensive line. He has no receivers. Kenneth Walker keeps getting hurt, and the defense takes no step forwards. Out of all the teams we've done so far, the Seahawks are the most confusing team that I've come across, which makes for a very good chapter. But for the fans of the Seahawks, might have been worried.
Maybe not. Yeah. Makes sense. Let's go on to chapter 7 before we reach the final chapter of our. Oh, yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? All right. Yeah, we're gonna let that ride. So the Denver Broncos are the next one on here. I'm gonna fix this. You go ahead and talk about
Denver Broncos. Brad and I have both talked about Bo Nix last year, how we're just really not really sure on him. Listen, as of right now, he's proved us both wrong, and we will eat that. We'll admit when we're wrong. The Broncos went out and got Hufanga and Dre Greenlaw from the 49ers. So when we talked about the 49ers in a previous chapter, and by the way, their GM went ahead and ran after both of those guys to sign them, but they're like, nah, 49ers, I'm good. I'm going to Denver where I can't breathe. So they got Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, and Evan Ingram. They spent about $100 million on those guys. Hefty price to pay. But the Broncos defense is already pretty good. You get guys like that who are nasty, who are physical, if they can regain, their healthy status, who are ballers. They already have a pretty good defensive line. Surtain's the best corner in the game. You get guys like that who fit that mantra, who fit that defense. You go out and get a chess piece like Evan Ingram. And then in the draft, I could see a scenario where they have their choice of Colson Loveland, maybe Tyler Warren, maybe Omarion Hampton, maybe Ashton Genty, or maybe Luther Burden. I think any one of those guys could provide a lot of value and a lot of key designs for Sean Payton to implement. The good outcome for the Broncos is the defense gets even stronger. Bo Nix takes that step forward with an addition in the draft and another year under his belt. The bad outcome is the former 49ers do not do well off their injury. Bo Nix takes that dreaded second-year step back, which, listen, we saw C.J. Stroud have that step back year. It happens to a lot of quarterbacks. They don't want to admit it. Brad, here's the thing. A lot of people, when they see quarterbacks go off in year one, they're like, oh, he's the god tier. He's an elite quarterback. You got to get some patience with these guys. You can't overreact. You can't underreact. React normally. Bo Nix was very good this year, and he looked the part. However, we cannot be completely sold on him. So I would say the Broncos taking a definite step forward overall as a team. Just watch out for Bo Nix taking maybe a slight step back.
Yeah. Or there's the other side of that, Bryce Young, where you have somebody that fails spectacularly and then turns it around. So we always say this. We never grade drafts that we do until 3 or 4 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyways, so yes, so the Denver Broncos and our penultimate chapter, if you know us at all, you know what this is going to be. It is the Dallas Cowfellas. Now, this is an interesting chapter because it was pretty easy to write this because there was a lot of source material since the year of our Lord 1995 to now on this specific chapter. So, Kyle, I will actually lead this if you'd like, and then you are more than welcome to slam on the Dallas Cowfellas right after me. So,
yes,
I'm tired of hearing this year of our Lord will be thouest year to hoist up the Lombardi Trophy. Unfortunately, that has not been the case for 29 years, and I know that because I was born in 95. My entire lifetime, I have not seen the Dallas Cowfellas do it. And let's be honest, Dak Prescott kind of fell in their laps. They didn't know what he was going to turn into. CeeDee Lamb, great draft pick, ruining him. I could go backwards. Romo was okay. We could keep doing this. We can keep going backwards and saying they have mediocre players at all times. And the problem is they are not willing to pay for premier talent.
Yep, there it is.
Exactly. There it is, Jerry. Let's hope that Jerry goes all in. Again, that is what kills me. The Cowfellas will not have a chance to compete for the Lombardi Trophy until Jerry is out of Dallas. That's just where I'm at. I'm tired of hearing it every year. The Cowfellas and their fans need to understand that in this chapter we talk about realism. And part of realism is to succeed in free agency, you have to spend money to get premier players, and they've never done it. That is my soapbox on the Dallas Cowfellas. That's why I wrote the introduction to this chapter. Kyle, being a fan of yonder Philadelphia Eaglets, will finish up this chapter with what precisely is the trajectory of the Dallas Cowfellas. Yes, they are the Cubs of the NFL. Well done, Jerry.
They are the Sixers of the NFL. Listen, it's true. Jerry Jones, like you said, right? It's not pony up and pay guys in free agency, and it's been that way for a while. And yes, at the preface, I said, it's not always good to spend millions of dollars in free agency. It doesn't always work out, but at times,
Jerry's comment wins. I'm going to leave that at the bottom of the rest of the episode because of how much I enjoyed that comment. That's going to stay.
Yes, we do hope Jerry lives forever.
We do.
Cowboys are awful. So you don't pay for free agents, you're not going to get any outcome, just like Brad said. Cowboys this offseason so far still hasn't paid their best player, Micah Parsons. That's concerning. And guess what? The price continues to go up. And I believe Jerry Jones just said, it's not a matter about money. We just want to get it right. No, it is a matter about money.
It is. Schottenheimer was like, well, we don't know what we're going to do with him yet, but I expect him to show up to everything. I was like, that's like saying, I'm not going to pay you any overtime, but could you work for like 7 more weeks without any pay?
Yeah.
What? I mean, the best defensive player, I'll say something really out there for you, Professor Kyle. The best defensive player you've probably had in the last 10 years, and you're not willing to pay him.
Yep. You could make an argument he's one of the best defensive players currently in football.
There you go. Yep.
And so like you pay that. They lost Zach Martin, which is huge, by the way. No one's talking about that. Mm-mm. He's the guy that you always said, he's had more Pro Bowls than holding penalties in his entire career. You lose that guy who was on the right side of Cooper Beebe and on the left side of Terrence Steele. Do you know how crucial it is to have an all-pro, future Hall of Famer guard next to 2 young offensive linemen? Do you know how much that impacts an offensive line as a whole?
Huge.
You're not going to find that. And listen, I thought about this today. You could go into the draft thinking, we'll get what we want. There is a scenario out there that they miss out on Tetro McMillan, Ashton Genty, Armand Membu, and Will Campbell. Those guys could all go before the Cowboys pick. So they're left with taking another
Sanders
or something, or overdrafting Omarion Hampton or something like that.
Of course.
That's a realistic possibility. So therefore, you still haven't found a complement to CD. You have not found a good running back, and you have not found a good offensive lineman to replace And listen, I like Dak. I'm not one of those Dak haters. I am a Cowboy hater, but I'm not a Dak hater. I think he's good.
Yeah.
However, just like a lot of quarterbacks in this league who are not God or elite tier, they need a good running game to be good. And you're not going to have a good running game without Zach Barton and no running backs to speak of.
Yep.
Speaking of that, they didn't sign a good running back. Javonte Williams is cooked. They have Band-Aids everywhere.
He's been injured every freaking season he's been in the league.
I'm so tired of drafting him in fantasy. I always think,
Same.
just like the Cowboys think this year is our year, I always think Javonte Williams, this year is his year, and I'm wrong. And they've also traded for 2 busts and Kenneth Murray and Kair Elam. Like, we know those guys aren't good. Like, we know they're busts. Like, I get it. It's fun to go after draft pedigree at times, but, like, we know they're not very good.
No. It's like trading for Ryan Leaf and saying you won the draft.
Right. Like, it's happened. We know he's not good. He's a bust. Listen, here's my little short ending to this. Is the good outcome is Dak is back. Tyler Guyton and Terrence Steele and Cooper Beebe all take a step forward, which highly unlikely if Zach Morton's not there. No. And then their run defense is solidified by one of their draft picks because they didn't sign anything in free agency. The bad outcome is the Cowboys failed to pay Micah. He leaves. They trade him, whatever. They cannot figure out their offensive line, and their run game is just as bad as last year, which means their overall team is just as bad as last year.
Yeah.
I don't think they got an influx of talent at all so far. And listen, you and I have both talked about, not a ton, but talked about a little bit this NFL draft. There's not many elite guys at the top. This is a very good depth draft. But if you're expecting to get a lot of high-performing, high-elite players in the first 3-4, you're probably not going to find that. Mm-hmm. So if you signed a bunch of $3 million Band-Aids and expecting to win the draft, you lost.
Yep.
So Cowboys chapter's not looking so good.
Mm-mm. Well, I will say that is the end of the first part of our book. I'm sure we could reveal more of that later. If you are interested in that book, of course, you can always follow us on YouTube, Spotify, Facebook for now. We'll talk about that later. And now X. We used to be on X, and then now we're back. If you're joining us on X, thank you very much. So yeah, that is our episode in a nutshell. We will be back with you next Wednesday. Let me confer with my schedule. I do want to see what we're covering that day. And also, Kyle, I forgot how much fun we had last year just saying Cooper Beebe's name. That every time you said it, I just had to do the Cooper Beebe. We always find some fun name and go with it. Okay, so we did free agency results. We did that. Next week is our second mock draft. Please make sure you come and watch live. It's going to be totally worth it for you to be here because not only are we doing a mock draft, we're taking you to the draft night. So make sure you attend that. We're going to dress to the nines. It's going to be a great time. Thank you for joining us as always. We always appreciate your support. And we are looking hard on some better ways to get to you, more efficient ways to get to you, and more content more often to get to you. Look out for updates for us on our social medias, and we will see you next week. Bye, guys.